The other day, I was telling my kid about the things that didn't exist when I was his age. He was astonished, a feeling I remember from when I was a child and had a similar talk with my mother. So today, let's astonish the whole family by remembering or discovering when the everyday things we take for granted came to be. Going decade by decade, let's see how our lives became what they are now. The most impactful invention of the first decade of the 20th century was plastic. Before that, most of what we have today was either made of wood or glass. Toys were mostly wooden and heavy, and baby bottles were glass. Plastic use grew over the century because it was extremely adaptable.
This rapid adaptability, together with the attractiveness, usefulness, and low cost of the plastic itself, that has made this industry one of the fastest growing in the nation's history.
Plastic did make life a bit safer and lighter, even if today it's a major environmental concern. Also from that decade came the washing machine and the vacuum cleaner, freeing a lot of time and making everyday life less demanding. The 1910s brought the zipper, a true fashion revolution, making buttons look dated, even if they never fully disappeared. The toaster, canned dog and cat food, and crossword puzzles are also from this decade, as are neon lights, which made cities a bit more interesting at night. But the real revolutionary invention was this, the toilet paper. Before it, people had to be creative. Corn cobs were a popular device in rural areas, urban folks favored newspaper or shop catalogs, and shells were used too in coastal areas. Tough times. By the 1920s, the world was at war. Ironically, this is the decade when Band-Aids were invented, in a kitchen, to help with small cuts. They became widespread only when Boy Scouts started to include them in their kits, and especially later, during World War II, when Johnson & Johnson sent millions of Band-Aids to soldiers for battlefield first aid. That wartime exposure turned them into a household name worldwide. Hair dryers and electric shavers also appeared in the 1920s, as did the car radio and the first traffic lights. A good combo if you ask me. But the rotary dial telephone and the electric light were the real game changers of 1920s households. Both had been invented decades earlier, in the late 19th century, but it was in this decade that they finally became widespread, transforming daily life. Before then, making a phone call meant picking up the receiver and speaking to an operator that would manually link your line through a switchboard, sometimes even listening in out of curiosity. The rotary dial phone cut out the middleman. For the first time, ordinary people could dial a number themselves and connect directly. Before the electric light became common, nights were dim and flickering. People lit their homes with candles or oil lamps, both smoky, dangerous, and a constant chore. You had to trim the wick, refill the oil, and hope the flame didn't catch the curtains. Streets were just as dark, lit only by gas lamps that someone had to ignite each evening with a long pole. When electric bulbs finally spread through homes in the 1920s, it was like daylight had moved indoors. You could flip a switch and flood a room with steady light. It must have felt like magic. By the 1930s, the world was entering the Great Depression, and people were looking for small comforts and cheap conveniences. This is when nylon appeared, invented by DuPont in 1935. Stockings before nylon were made of silk, which was expensive and delicate. If you snagged them on a chair, that was it, ruined. Nylon changed that. It was cheap, stretchy, and suddenly millions of women could afford stockings that lasted a bit more. And nylon didn't stop there. It was in toothbrush bristles, fishing lines, and eventually parachutes during the war. One new material, and suddenly the everyday world felt just a little more modern. This decade also brought us the supermarkets, a convenience we all embraced and that truly showed its importance in recent years. The 1940s brought us something you probably have in your kitchen right now, Tupperware. Before Tupperware, people stored food in tins, jars, or whatever container they could find.
This is Tupperware, the airtight plastic containers that keep good foods fresher, longer. You can freeze it, stack it, any which way. It won't leak or spill. Tupperware keeps aroma and flavor locked in. And because you can see what's inside, no more forgotten leftovers. just good, fresh plan-over.
But Tupperware didn't become popular in stores. It spread through Tupperware parties, where women would gather in each other's living rooms, watch a demonstration, and buy a set. It wasn't just food storage, it was also one of the first direct sales empires, giving women their own source of income in post-war suburbia. This decade also brought us disposable diapers, Velcro, and the Polaroid camera. And it's also the decade that saw the electric guitar reach mainstream culture. The 1950s were all about the suburban boom, and nothing captured that more than the credit card. Diners Club launched the first one in 1950. Before that, shopping meant either paying cash or juggling store-specific credit accounts. Suddenly, with one little piece of plastic, you could eat at a restaurant or buy something in a shop without carrying wads of cash. It changed not just convenience, but also the psychology of spending. For better or worse, modern consumer culture took off here. This is also the decade when black and white TVs dominated living rooms, even if the color TV was already invented. The color TV was seen as a very expensive luxury. The dishwasher and super glue both date from the 50s, as do Barbie and McDonald's. By the 1960s, the future seemed to be arriving all at once. Space travel was pushing science to new frontiers.
9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Okay, we got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on proper heading.
And the technologies created for the Apollo missions quickly found their way into everyday life. Freeze-dried food for the pantry, cordless appliances for the home, even microchips that would one day shrink computers from the size of a room to the size of a pocket. On Earth, money itself became more futuristic with the arrival of the ATM in 1967, letting people withdraw cash at any time without stepping inside a bank, a true revolution in city life. And all around, homes looked suddenly modern in a new way. Plastic was no longer just a practical material, but a design statement, shaping bold chairs, bright lamps, and glossy kitchenware in colors that seemed pulled straight from a sci-fi set. The 1970s was the decade when technology came rushing into the home in ways that truly changed daily routines. The microwave oven, once too expensive for most families, finally became affordable. And suddenly reheating food was a matter of seconds instead of firing up the stove. But if the microwave saved time in the kitchen, the VCR completely reshaped leisure. Before it, television was a live event. You watched shows when they aired or you missed them. The VCR changed that by letting families record their favorite programs and, for the first time, decide when to watch. Even more transformative was the rise of the video rental industry. Shelves of VHS tapes meant you could bring the cinema into your living room. Entire family nights were built around choosing a movie, popping popcorn, and sitting together in front of the TV. After the movie ended, you had to rewind the tape or else be fined by the rental store. Alongside this entertainment revolution, the 1970s also gave us the first video game consoles, like Pong, that turned televisions into interactive fun. And for music lovers, the Sony Walkman made its debut, making music portable and personal for the first time. Even cars reflected the changing times. Child car seats became standard, a sign of growing awareness that safety at home should extend to the road as well. The 1980s was a decade that brought the future straight into the household. Personal computers, which had been the realm of hobbyists and businesses, started appearing on family desks. First clunky beige boxes like the Commodore 64 or IBM PC, and later Apple's sleeker Macintosh. Before that, most writing meant typewriters, and most games meant board games. After the 1980s, entire families began getting familiar with floppy disks, word processors, and early computer games, setting the stage for the digital world to come. Mobile phones also made their debut, though at first they were brick-sized, expensive, and mostly seen in the hands of wealthy business people. Still, the idea of carrying a phone outside the home was enough to spark the imagination. Meanwhile, compact discs, the CD, changed music forever. Before, cassette tapes hissed and wore out with every play, suddenly CDs offered crisp, skip-free sound that felt nearly magical. Home gaming also exploded with the arrival of the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1983, turning Mario and Zelda into household names and cementing video games as a cultural force. And beyond the living room, safety and health standards kept evolving. Seatbelt use became legally required in many countries during this decade, and it quickly shifted from being seen as an annoyance to something automatic, a small but profound change in daily life. The 1980s was the first time ordinary families could look around their homes and feel like they were living in a world their grandparents would barely recognize. The 1990s was the decade when the world went online. The internet moved from universities and government labs into ordinary homes, first with the scratchy sound of dial-up modems and later with faster connections. Before this, finding information meant digging through encyclopedias or heading to the library. Finding places in a city required a paper map. After, you could type a few words and discover an entire world of knowledge from your desk. Email changed how people communicated, replacing letters and even many phone calls, while instant messaging created the first taste of constant digital connection. At the same time, mobile phones shrank from the bulky bricks of the 1980s to something you could actually slip into a pocket, making personal communication on the go a reality for more than just the wealthy. Entertainment also shifted. DVDs replaced VHS tapes, offering sharper pictures, no rewinding, and extra features that made movie watching at home feel closer to cinema quality. Video game consoles like the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 turned 3D graphics into an everyday experience, pushing games deeper into mainstream culture. And in music, MP3 players began to appear, slowly loosening the cassette tape's grip before the iPod would finish the job in the 2000s. For the average household, the 1990s was the first time life felt truly digital, where screens and networks became central to how families worked, played, and stayed in touch. The 2000s was the decade when the digital world stopped being something you visited and became the place you lived. The internet switched to broadband, making it fast, always on, and woven into the background of daily life. Google became the way people searched for everything, while Wikipedia turned into the world's first free living encyclopedia. Email was no longer just a tool for work, it became how families stayed in touch. And soon social networks like Facebook and MySpace began reshaping friendships and communication. At the same time, the mobile phone transformed into something far bigger. In 2007, the iPhone launched, putting a camera, music player, web browser, and GPS into a single sleek device. Before smartphones, you needed a separate gadget for each of those things. Afterwards, you carried a digital Swiss Army knife in your pocket. Music also went fully digital. First came the iPod, which made entire CD collections portable, and then iTunes and MP3 downloads replaced shelves of discs with files. Even entertainment at home shifted again, as DVDs peaked and the very first streaming services, including a little DVD rental company called Netflix, began experimenting with online video. The 2010s was the decade when the smartphone became not just a gadget, but the center of daily life. By then, almost everyone carried one. At the same time, streaming overtook broadcast and physical media. Netflix became a full-blown streaming giant, followed by platforms like Spotify for music and YouTube as the default place for video. That shift meant shows, movies, and songs were no longer tied to schedules or collections. They were simply available instantly on demand. Social media also defined the decade, as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and later TikTok turned everyday life into something that could be shared in real time with the whole world. Cloud storage quietly changed habits too. Instead of passing around USB sticks or burning CDs, people stored their files online and accessed them from anywhere. Even homes started to feel futuristic, as voice assistants like Alexa and Google Home entered kitchens and living rooms, normalizing the idea of talking to technology. The 2010s was the moment the internet wasn't just something you logged onto, it was a constant layer of life, wrapping around work, leisure, and even family routines. The 2020s opened with a world suddenly reliant on technology in ways most of us had never imagined. Video calls went from being a niche corporate tool to a lifeline for families, classrooms, and social gatherings almost overnight during the pandemic. Before, even though the technology was already there, working from home was a rarity. After, grandparents read bedtime stories over Zoom, students attended virtual classrooms, and offices ran without offices. Delivery apps transformed how we got food, groceries, and even medicine. What used to require errands and planning now arrived at our door with a few taps. Smart home devices became more common, controlling lights, thermostats, and security with just a voice command. And artificial intelligence quietly started helping with everything from organizing photos to suggesting recipes and even assisting work tasks, making tech feel both invisible and indispensable. In just a few years, life became faster, more connected, and more digital than anyone could have predicted. A world where the boundary between online and offline has almost vanished. So when you look around at the everyday things in your home, remember each of these was once new, once astonishing, and once a glimpse of the future. And the future is still coming. The inventions your kids will take for granted might not even exist yet. Thank you for watching Into the Loop. If you enjoyed this journey through the everyday inventions that shaped our lives, don't forget to press like and leave a comment telling us which invention surprised you the most, or which one you couldn't live without today.